Hey, this is Chris Parsons from The Last Click. I am privileged right now. About, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, Jim and I met at GELF here in New York City. So a long time ago, but I was green in my career and had the pleasure of meeting with Jim and the team and just really inspired from the conversations that we had way back then. And the industry, while it's moving so fast, a lot of the conversations are the same, different labels on it, but very much the same. Jim, I would love for you to introduce the audience to yourself, and then we'll get into your background and where you think the industry's going.
Thanks so much, Chris. Great to see you and great to be on your pod here. So I'm Jim Okamura. I'm a partner at McMillan Doolittle, which is a boutique retail strategy consulting firm. As Chris, also mentioned, I'm also a co-founder of the Global E-commerce Leaders Forum, or GELF, as we like to call it. So we've been doing lots of international work over the years, and it's been a great opportunity to kind of build a community around kind of the globalization.
And what you do is really critical for our industry because a lot of people may know one or two people, but the networking, the real camaraderie of it all, and being able to come to an event like yours and walk away with 20 contacts that they can vent with, they can ask for opinions on different technologies, providers, and then also they have the ability to reach out to you and get some advice as well. So it's pretty something special that you built.
It's been really interesting, I got to say, we rather naively started this community, right? It started, my history goes back to, again, Toronto, so I'm Canadian, as well, and as a partner at JC Williams Group in Toronto, and actually moved down to Chicago 30 years ago to open up the JC Williams Group office, right? And as we've over the years, as we've often clients would ask to kind of meet each other, right? And that's kind of where I was doing the international market entry, planning for some bigger brands, in Gap and Adidas and Harley, and they wanted to kind of meet each other. So we found that the executives charged with the global growth, international, roles, they really didn't have a community. Right. I mean, we used to get frustrated with, the big digital retail shows in the past, the shop.orgs and so on, that there might be one session on international. And we said, no, there's people out there that, they really, they need to dive deep. And sure enough, that's exactly what we found that, there's a lot of these international executives, almost by definition, they have small internal teams because they partner so much,
Yeah.
right? The international ecosystem is very much, alive and well, and you just couldn't do it without a village. So,
Yeah, and I remember it was funny when I first came, the word international to me struck me because Canada is actually considered from a lot of US retailers to be international.
sure.
And when you're in Canada, you don't think of yourself as international. You think about you're selling in North America. But it was a really flip of the mindset to be like, yeah, it makes sense for us to come and speak to them because even though we're north of the US, it is a different experience shipping and all of the rules on with logistics and what items can sell in different CSA versus FDA. All of those things, it's not as cut and dry to come and just open up a store.
Well, not to mention, consumer attitudes, towards
Right.
U.S. goods.
Which fluctuates. Sometimes it's up and sometimes it's down.
Yeah, well, exactly. We've certainly seen a lot of that, in recent months and years, but yeah, it's always where largely we have U.S. based, brands and retailers in our Gulf community, but almost without exception, those same brands, they're often half of their global sales are coming in Canada.
Right.
Right. So, that's always been sort of the natural for a lot of, brands just to move up, whether obviously some bigger ones that have came up with stores, but once, cross-border e-commerce really kind of took off, I think, we've seen a lot of companies really try to optimize, their Canadian, revenue channels just because, they know they could be doing better. And that's often the case, with brands who are at, again, different stages of their global journey, right? I
Mhm.
mean, you have to stay within whatever resources you've got to play with, right?
Yeah.
And often that means, being kind of scrappy. right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've kind of seen. But that's why, when we look at some of the big brands, who have, this interesting portfolio of, you can get joint venture partners, distributors. They're selling through obviously marketplace selling, DTC selling locally, DTC selling cross border, right? All these different business models. I mean, it's why it is challenging, certainly, to again, how do we really fine tune that? Whether it's for market share and top line goals, or if it's more, kind of bottom line and profitability kind of goals, or some balance, thereof, right? It's it's just not easy. Even the biggest, we were talking earlier today with some people that, we've seen certainly over the years, even the biggest retailers that have tried international have had to retreat, right? At
Yeah.
various points.
Yeah, I mean, I remember one specifically with a red dot coming into Canada, and unfortunately, they could never get past the Zeller's quality of replenishment, and it was, I think, a very short-lived, maybe 2 years top.
Well, and I think it's a good example of, just how critical supply chain
Yeah.
is in all this, right? I mean, that's where we never set out to meet every trade lane specialist carrier, when we started this, but we know them now
Yeah.
because they found us, right? And over time, I think it's been an interesting, say, past decade or so. I think where previous to that, I don't believe that, supply chain had a seat at the strategy table. I think, clearly they do now, right? And I
Yeah.
think, I mean, it's Amazon and Walmart, I mean, made that in vogue that, that is a critical function and needs to be fully integrated within the business model and business strategy. And so, internationally, that becomes even more enhanced just because of, especially now with just the rising costs of kind of moving product. Where do you want to have these inventory pools that you're kind of drawing from?
Hmm.
And because you make the wrong decision, you could have way too much sitting somewhere just kind of aging and eating up your capital. Or if you don't have enough, obviously, then you're leaving more money on the table there as well. So it's just, yes, it's tricky. It's really tricky to kind of get the right, kind of supply chain.
Yeah, and I'd rather kind of be sold out on some items and struggle to get it back in than have stuff millions of dollars sitting there because you kind of forecasting way off. But I think the other opportunity coming into the Canadian marketplace is when Canadians shop in the US, a lot of times their experience is extended assortment, newness, and that brand promise can't be delivered in Canada. They don't have the same breadth and depth of assortment that they can bring into the market. So I think when they come into the Canadian market, they have to, I guess, shift what the consumers are going to expect as the initial shopping experience. If they can't replicate what they're doing, they should be damn clear when they come to market in Canada because it's countless how many people I know will drive across the border to here experience Target because of the assortment. And then if you can't deliver that in the market, it's just you're like, why did you even open up here?
Yeah, well, and I think it's even for any retailer crossing a border, trying to fulfill their brand's promise
Yeah.
is so difficult because, again, when you're just starting out, I mean, you do have to be scrappy, and yeah, so that you don't have the luxury of being able to spend your way into
Yeah.
that customer experience, and yet. Absolutely, the customer's not going to wait for you to, cut your
Figure it out.
teeth and
Yeah.
yeah, figure it out. Like, and they expect that, from the day one,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's why, when I talk to veteran kind of VPs of international at big brands, they almost always, will talk of, okay, at a certain point, you need to commit to competing against the best local
Mm.
competitors, right? In whatever market that you're talking about. Yes, that's so far from kind of the reality today, right? I mean, I think we stand up, some, kind of channel of sorts, but often, it is kind of hamstrung, by, and this is all we can afford right
Right.
now. Right. And so, yeah, you do have to kind of, grow into it. That's why I think the partnership strategies are so kind of strong. And it's, as Victoria's Secret has said, on stage at GELF, their Middle Eastern, like partners are bigger than they are,
Hmm.
right? And they've got tons of digital talents. It's not like we can tell them, what to do, right? But again, that was part of the whole brand integrity issue of, how do you make sure that they're kind of staying on brand with you, representing your branded products.
Yeah,
And
it's great.
these are difficult things that, yeah, it's not easy to kind of, do well.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't blame companies that go international, and it's hard enough within province to
Yeah.
get it right and
Yeah.
start expanding your stores from one province to the next. The seasons are delayed, and
Yeah.
you're selling grass seed, and it's still snowing in a specific community.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's tough when you have all of those things that you really have to think thoughtful and consider. With your next, we were speaking last night. You're going to be hosting an event shortly. What's the details that you have for that?
Yeah, yeah, we're trying something a little bit different, in this case, for our Global E-commerce Leaders Forum. For the past, several years, we've really been broadening our coverage. Whereas we obviously have e-commerce in our name, that's where we kind of really started. But in recent years, with the urgings of, a lot of our kind of members, they were saying, yeah, you need to add international wholesaling and selling through distributors. You need to again, look at the full set of channels that big brands may deploy as they're thinking of how do we move our product around. And so, that's really what at the same time, we were also being asked to host more kind of intimate events. People love to again get together and just really learn from each other, right? And I think that's something that we've just really seen over time. So we're trying out, what we're calling the GELF New York Global Experts Workshop, and it's really targeting, senior executives from big enterprise, brands that have probably been, selling globally, for decades, all pre-digital. Right. And so, there's in some cases decades long, relationships that all of a sudden we're kind of asking those same international partners, what do you bring into the digital party? Right. And with varying answers to that, as well. So this workshop is going to really, try to let, again, people know uh, who they can call if they have some issues. So that our goals for participants are really that we want them to get to know each other. So, who can I call if I have an issue that, I kind of trust and I see as my peer, right?
Yeah.
But secondly, we're certainly looking for people to walk away from this workshop with a just a really practical, it could be tactical, idea.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's why we wanted to. One of the topics we will focus on it are margin drivers or profitability drivers, right? And that could cover anything from again, where are we placing our inventory for an international order through to the business model itself? Are we doing that in a cross-border way? Or are we again, going to have a full team, in country, like say over in Western Europe? All of these are some of the issues that we think that the answers actually reside within the community
Right.
itself. All right, because no one's got this nailed.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's why community is so great, to be honest. It reminds me so much of kind of the early days of shop.org and, when the digital community, was sort of us against the world and but we all shared so much. That's still what when I look back, I think that's what really drove kind of digital retail, especially in the early days. People were not afraid to share with each other.
I believe it was the one thing I learned coming to the event years ago. And I often talk about this, so people, it's not going to be the first time hearing it from me, but the relationships and the networking I find is equally to more important than the stuff you see on stage during the events. It's the backroom conversations, the coffee in the morning, the lunches, the dinners in the evening, that you build real relationships with people that will, even though you're not working together, will be there for you when you need an opinion, some advice, or even just someone to vent to.
Absolutely. I think, I think in part with all the rise of AI, I do draw so many comparisons, to the early days of digital retail.
Yeah.
And again, everyone's kind of in the same boat, at least initially. Now, some I think are starting to pull away from others as
Yeah.
they have, kind of made, greater commitments. But it is, I think, a great opportunity just to turn to the person next to you and ask, "What are you doing? How's it going?" Right? And it's kind of amazing just that, right now, because I think everyone is kind of grasping a little bit and trying to figure out, test out a lot of proof of concepts out there. Right? That's a great time for a community to really show their muscle.
Yeah, yeah, and the diversity of thinking that you get from these communities, because often in retail we are attached to our own model, our own path, but to have the diversity of thought is such a great opportunity. So, how can people find out more information about your event?
Certainly, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's often the easiest way. Or again, Macmillan Doolittle, J Okamura at mdretailing.com. It's always an easy way to reach me as well.
Great, and I'll put all your description and information in podcast descriptions as well. And Jim, thank you. It's such a pleasure. I'm
Yeah,
glad
great to
we've
see
had
you.
the
Yeah.
opportunity to connect again.
Yeah.